These are some of the most common mistakes I see new online book arbitrage sellers make. I've made them plenty of times, and my goal is to help you not make them, so let's dive right into it. We're looking at really an incredible book here with human anatomy and physiology. If you look at this over the last 2,800 days, you can clearly see that it's just a textbook that does very, very well every single season. Its sales rank gets incredibly low in August and also in January. And so it would be very easy for somebody who's new to online book arbitrage to get really excited about this and go, wow, you know, in off seasons, I can probably pick this up for between 50 to 60 bucks, and I could probably sell for north of $100 during the actual textbook season, which is great. But the main problem that I see with this, and this is again a huge mistake newer sellers make, is they'll find a book that they want to buy, and instead of checking to make sure that they can actually sell it, that they're not restricted, they just buy it. And when they get the book at either the prep center or at their house, guess what? They're out of luck because they can't actually sell it. So the easiest way to know whether or not you can sell it is to have a Chrome extension downloaded, such as Seller Amp, which automatically tells you whether or not you can or cannot sell it. And no worries if you're just starting out with online book arbitrage, you don't need Seller Amp. It's just something that is nice to have that you could think about getting later on in the future. But what you should be doing is every time before you buy the book, you're finding something that you want to buy, just double check that you can sell it. And so that looks like scrolling down to the product detail page, going ahead and actually copying the ISBN 10 or ISBN 13, or even just grabbing that in the URL up here where you can copy that, come back to your Amazon seller account, you can come up here to the menu, go to catalog, add a product, and once you're there, you can go ahead and type that product in like this. You'll see that it actually goes ahead and pops up there. And you can see there's actually no ability for me to sell it. You are not approved to list this product or are not currently accepting application. You would be surprised how often people buy books for the purpose to resell on Amazon that they cannot actually sell on Amazon. And the reason why this happens is because we're buying a lot of books, maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 books per week, maybe even more than that. So every once in a while, maybe you just forget and you end up buying one of these books. And yeah, it really does sting because then you have to figure out what to do with it. So for my newbies out there, make sure you can actually sell the book before you buy it. And I know a lot of you are also going to say, Joji, but wait, there's actually another reason why you shouldn't sell this book. And that's because if you use Bookmine Counterfeit Calculator Checker and enter the ISBN, you'll see that Bookmine believes that the counterfeit likelihood of this book is highly likely. So one thing that you'll notice with a lot of these college textbooks that do incredibly well, they have a very, very good sales rank the entire year, and especially in the January and August textbook season just sell incredibly well at very high prices. Oftentimes those are books that are heavily or could have been heavily counterfeited because, again, think about it from the perspective of somebody who's wanting to counterfeit make money. They're going to only want to sell books that are worth a lot of money that sell very, very quick, very, very often. So make sure, this is number 2, right? And before you buy a college textbook, to use the Bookmine Counterfeit Calculator Checker and just type the ISBN in there. It will tell you whether or not it's highly likely, very likely, likely, or unlikely. And that's not to say that this is 100% accurate, but it's like wearing a seatbelt. In most cases, it is going to be fairly accurate. And again, it doesn't mean that if you were to have bought that book that it is going to be counterfeit. It just means that the chance of it being counterfeit relative to other books is much higher. And so therefore you should avoid it, because really the major risk of getting your account deactivated or shut down is you selling books that are counterfeit, and you have a law firm essentially make buys on your account where they're buying these very highly popular textbooks, and they inspect those books, deem that they are counterfeit, and then essentially tell Amazon to suspend your account. And unless you can prove otherwise that they're not counterfeit, which is very hard to do, then your account is in jeopardy. So make sure you use the Bookmine Counterfeit Calculator if you are selling college textbooks. Again, it's very simple. You just go to Bookmine Counterfeit Calculator, type in the ISBN, it'll tell you, the likelihood of it. And if it comes back unlikely, just understand as well that this calculator changes, every so often as new books are deemed more likely to be counterfeit. So just because you bought a book in the past and it was unlikely doesn't mean that it couldn't in the future become likely or highly likely. So just understand that you don't want to be selling books that are likely to be counterfeit. You're just putting your account at risk. And don't worry, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of other college textbooks that aren't like this, that aren't highly likely to be counterfeited, that you'd have much less risk selling. All right, number 3, often newer sellers get caught up in buying books that are tanking in price or cheaper because there are just way too many offers on the listing, and maybe there isn't enough demand to actually overcome the additional offers or the additional number of competitors or sellers trying to sell the book. So here's a good example of a book, Foundations Teacher's Manual. Really, the whole year it has sold quite well. In October, it was over 100. December, January is kind of creeping down to the 30s. March, you got, right around 27. And then it actually did shoot right back up in the 70s and 80s. And then in July, came back down to the 30s and just recently dropped from 31 down to 19. That's why Bookmine found it, is because, hey, this book over the last 6 months was selling upwards of 80, upwards of 35, and now it's much cheaper than that. So Bookmine basically found this. And so I found it on Bookmine, and now I'm basically saying, okay, well, is this a book that we would actually want to buy? What you notice about this book is on the bottom graph here, the used offer count over the entire year is essentially just going up. And so what you're wanting to do in this case is to see whether or not the current offer count at its current height, whether or not there's history of it being that high in the past. So all I'm going to do is come here and click on the last 2,600 days, and you can clearly see that the used offer count has really never been as high as it has been, just right now in this moment, which indicates that the amount of supply of this book is essentially double or triple what it is normally over the last 4 or 5 years. So what you would expect is that this book's used price is probably going to hang around in the $25 to $30 range going forward until we start to see a bunch of those offers sell out. And again, it is possible that this price could go back up, but for the time being, until you get 25 to 30 offers off this listing, it's unlikely that it's going to rebound. Now, what I do want to say is a rising offer count in of itself doesn't automatically mean that the book is going to tank. And what you have to understand, and this is kind of the thing that is going towards more intermediate to advanced sellers, understanding when the rising offer count is too great relative to the amount of demand, and then also understanding when the rising offer count doesn't matter because the demand is so high that it doesn't matter. So here's a great example of a high school book, Ways of the World. It's the newest edition. Victor has shared this book over the last couple of years. It's a book that just pumps. It just sells so incredibly well. Basically, this sales rank bowl gets so low for so long, literally for an entire month. It's just so low. With the sales rank being 10, 15,000, on most of these days, sometimes under 10,000. And so this is a book that is selling many, many, many copies per day, maybe 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 copies a day. I mean, a ton of copies. And so you could have seen, the August 2024 did really well. And then going into the 2025 season, wow, that offer count actually did march up to 130 to 150, way higher than it had ever been when you look at past historical data. But the thing you have to understand is once you become a seasoned bookseller, you understand that this type of sales rank, when it's that long and that low, from July, August, September, October, that rise in offer count does not matter. And how do we know that? I mean, just take a look at it. Not even halfway through the season, basically the offer count made its way all the way down to about 17 after being at 140, 150. So there were 150 people on the listing. By the middle of the season, there's only 17 left. So essentially, everyone got obliterated. Everyone got annihilated. Anyone who had a copy basically sold this book. And again, that's kind of more of a pro tip. In this case, yes, there is an offer count that is much higher than it has ever had historically, but based on the amount of demand for this book, that rising offer count does not matter. So let's go back to, again, the teacher manual. Notice that this book has risen from about being historically in like the 10 to 20 range, all the way up to 50. So in other words, 2.5 times greater. But again, you don't see any seasonal period where the sales rank gets that low for that long, indicating that this is a book that's going to sell, anywhere from like 5, maybe 10 times a month. It's just not going to sell a lot. And so the rising offer count is way too high relative to the demand of this book. And so therefore, I want to buy it, I would pass on it. All right, the next book that I want to go over is a book that looks actually quite good. And it is a book that has been selling for at least $90 or more. The used price has been much higher than that. The new price has been around $90. Multiple sales in late 2024 going into early to mid 2025, selling in the 70s, even recently selling as high as 50. And look, it's all the way down to 22. And again, this is a book that Bookmine found because of the fact that, its price is $22 and it was selling for the 50s and up in the 70s. So that's a book that you would want Bookmine to find. But again, you're going to want to do a little bit more due diligence. And when you look at the actual image of this book, the big red flag that you should see is the year 2023. And so one mistake a lot of newbies make is that they tend to buy college textbooks that are starting to tank and had previous textbook seasons that look great, but they tank so quickly because of the fact that, well, if the year 2023 is in the title or in the actual cover art of the book, guess what? There's probably a 2024 or 2025. There's probably going to be a 2026. So the cycling of the textbooks and the publishing cycle is just so fast on a year-to-year basis that what is normally going to happen with these books is that they'll just tank in price. So what looks like a good pickup at 22 bucks, okay, let's sell for 75, is more of like, well, this book is probably going to start hanging out around this $20-ish price range and probably also slow down in sales, which you can clearly see when you expand the historical data. Keep it where this book was selling much more quickly with a much lower sales rank back in 2023, because again, the book is for 2023. Now, if you just do a quick search on Amazon for Contractor's price guide, you can basically see the 2025, the 2020, the 2021, the 2022. So there's obviously a ton of different editions. And you could, of course, go back in each one of those and see, are they still selling? It looks like they do still sell, but again, at a much lower rate. So all I'm trying to say here is when you do see a textbook, regardless of if it does have the year in it, if you see the publishing cycle where going from one edition to the second edition to the next edition is like a 1 year gap, that's just not a good sign. It's more likely a book that's going to tank, probably not go back up in value, and so you don't want to buy this. All right, the next mistake I see so many newer sellers make is over-leveraging themselves in a variety of ways. So the easiest way people over-leverage themselves is they actually don't spend money that is their own. So they go into debt, racking a bunch of money up on a credit card, and I really would not recommend doing that. I really think you should be playing with house money, meaning like playing with money that you actually already have that you can set aside to start investing in buying books. So that's that's the first way, is people will just spend way more money than they have, and you can get into trouble doing that. I just don't recommend it. But the second way, and the more important way here, is over-leveraging, meaning buying more copies of a book than you should relative to the amount of money that you can spend. So I'm going to say you're a new online book arbitrage seller. I'm going to say you only have $1,000 this month to spend on books. Well, let's go back to the Ways of the World book. This is a high school book that did incredibly well. Basically could have picked up copies anywhere from December of last year all the way up to April for anywhere between $90 to about $105. And this book basically was up into the 170s at the lowest used price. Okay, so easily this is a book that pretty much everyone who bought it on was making $30, $35, $40 per copy. Now, the thing a lot of people see is that, okay, wow, this is a great book. I have $1,000 cash to spend on books. Let me just buy 10 copies. Or in other words, spend 100% of my available capital, 100% of what is going to be used to buy inventory for a business, and put it into this one book. That is massively over leveraging yourselves, because now what happens is if that book doesn't perform well, 100% of your buys fail. And that's just not something that you want to happen. So yes, even though sometimes you can buy many copies of a book, maybe even if it's just a couple copies of the book, that doesn't mean that you should. There's a difference between how many copies you could buy if you had the available capital versus how many you should buy based upon the amount of capital that you have right now. So going back to, okay, you have $1,000 to spend this month, I would say just buying a single copy of this book for maybe the next season for $100 would be the most that I would say. That's 10% of the available capital you have, and the 10% of the value of your inventory just on this one book. And again, even at 10%, that's pretty risky, because if that book fails, well, guess what? 10% of your inventory is a fail. There's nothing you can really do about it, right? And at the end of the day, what we are doing is making educated guesses about books that we think are going to go back up in value based upon the fact that historically they have done that. But the thing is, you won't be right all the time. So the easiest way to not get burned is not to be over leveraged with having a bunch of copies of a book, especially if it represents a large majority or percentage of the amount of money you have to spend on buying those books. So remember that this is a sliding scale, because also if you're very well capitalized, buying 100 copies for $10,000 might also not be considered over leveraged, because if let's say you have the ability to spend 100 to 200,000 or 300,000 every single month on books, which is kind of crazy, but technically possible. In that case, as a percentage of what you have to spend, it wouldn't be over leveraged. So the point I'm trying to make is just because you could buy more copies because the data supports it doesn't mean you should, right? You're going to want to spread out your risk and diversify kind of your book portfolio so that I would say at most you have like 10% of the value of inventory in one item. I mean, honestly, it'd be better to have 5% or less, unless you really feel confident about that book. I would say this is one of those books I feel really, really confident about that, yeah, going up to 10% is fine. But at the end of the day, you also want to make sure that if this loses, you still got a lot of other books that have a good chance of making money to kind of, bump up the portfolio. And the last thing that I have here for newer sellers is before you buy a book, understand how long is it likely going to take me to sell it. So for example, here's a book we have that is currently priced here at around $27. And so somebody who's newer might go like, wow, okay, this book here has been selling in the 70s, up into the 90s. Okay, yeah, maybe it sold only 4 times back here for around 20. But when you look at the last 2,500 days, yeah, this book has always been selling in the 60s and the 70s, up in the hundreds. The thing though I want you to understand with this book is, if you can count the number of sales rank drops in the year, that is a red flag. That's an indicator that this is not a fast moving book. This is a book that is going to take time to sell, right? And one of the biggest mistakes newer sellers make is not understanding that. So they think, okay, yeah, I did buy a great deal at $27. I do think I have a good likelihood of selling it for between $75 and $85. But they also think about this book is very likely not going to sell for 6 months, maybe 9 months, maybe not even a year. Because if you look at the number of sales rank drops, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We're looking at 11 sales rank drops over a 1-year period. And so, yeah, you could average that on, say, about 1 sale per month. But you also have to understand there's about 8 or 9 other people selling the book in used condition and about 15 other people selling the book in new condition. So you're competing for 1 sale a month with 30 other people. It's not really a good shot that this book is going to sell tomorrow or the next week or the next month. So having a good idea of, okay, well, when I do buy this book, how long is it going to take me to sell it is important, especially when you don't have a lot of money, because you do want that capital roll. You do want to get your money back as quickly as possible so that you can put it into buying more books. So I really hope you enjoyed the video. That's all I have for today. Again, if you can kind of avoid these things in the beginning, I think it's going to make you a better online book arbitrage seller in the future. And again, don't be too harsh on yourself if you made these mistakes. The only reason why I know these is because I've made these mistakes. And so all I'm trying to do is to help you make the mistake less often. And sometimes, honestly, the best way to learn is to make the mistake yourself and learn from that experience. But hopefully this helped. If it did, make sure you comment down below, give the video a like, consider subscribing, and I'll see you all on the next one.